Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Architect, Cool Stuff Inc., and Quiver. Today I'm really excited because I have one of my actual, person I've just read a lot in the history of Magic joining me for the first time. Gerry Thompson, the famed Gerry T, one of the best deck builders ever, and just really cool dude. I'm so glad you're able to join me today, man. It's I'm super stoked about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name has gotten out there a lot for good reasons and bad, So it is no surprise you've heard of me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have a lot of notoriety, both as being an incredibly good player, incredibly good deck builder, and also somebody who rouses a little rabble once in a while and shakes the trees and interacts with WotC in ways that a lot of us wish we could, and then gets in trouble for it.
Well,
sometimes.
look. Part of the reason why that stuff happened, one of the things that I wanted to maybe accomplish is encourage other people to do maybe some similar things,
Hmm.
So it is part of the reason to do something like that is to show that it can be done.
I think you were ahead of your time, but I think culture has finally caught up to the point where, well, I don't know. I don't know much. We could talk about this stuff as we go, um, because at some point we should just stop being elusive and tell the people what I'm talking about. Uh, but more than that, though, you've always been a person who I've respected a lot just because I've always felt that you've been in the community, you've been very outspoken and upstanding regarding your moral position and stances. You're just behavior. You feel almost like a modern day Pakula in the sense of not trying to clean up the game necessarily, but also just not being a jackhole and trying to be I know that there's a lot of people who've been like, oh, I hate that guy. But everything I've seen about you has always been you are trying to be on the up and up, which I've always just respected a lot.
Well, you didn't know me 20 years ago, and the internet was not as big of a place 20 years ago.
Probably
Uh,
true.
I imagine that had I been born 10 years later, you probably would have heard different things. I was not a good person in my 20s. I'm the first to admit that, and there are definitely plenty of other people who will tell you the same.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I've definitely heard stories of much less calm Jerry, shall we say, or I don't know, a little bit more of a jerk. But in my interactions with you, I got to meet you in Richmond for after during one of the SCG events, and I was just like, holy crap, it's Gerry T. Which is you're one of the 3 people I've ever been starstruck by in Magic, which is weird because I'm you're just a chill dude who's just chill and it was it's fine, but it was just also I am not prepared for this conversation. What do I do?
I thought it was fun. We were hanging out. We got
It
lunch.
was delightful. It was a
Yeah.
really fun conversation. So for the people who are too young to understand, Gerry Thompson here has basically been a pro for a long time. He won a pro tour in 2017 or some when. And then also you got to work at Wizards on Cons of Tarkir and you consulted on Modern Horizons or something like that. Um, and then you also made it to Worlds and protested about the way that the Wizards employees were treating pro players and gave up your World slot an hour before Worlds. Because I remember Larrabee was like, what the hell? What do I do? What's going on? Um, but it was also one of the most ballsiest moves I've ever seen anybody do, which is this is a high profile, guaranteed, like everything. And you're just no, you guys are doing the wrong thing. I'm going to walk away from this. And that was very brave.
Yeah, in terms of Raising awareness. I think that Worlds, especially when it was the Worlds format, when it was like the smaller field, right? It was like
Yeah, it was like
24 or
16
32
players,
people.
something
Yeah,
some
very
very
small.
small number.
And in hindsight, I maybe would have done things a little bit differently, but in terms of like maximizing efficacy, which was certainly part of my plan at the time, I think I did do just that, which was messaging Scott about 15 minutes before the tournament started. Uh, so yeah, there's that.
Oh, God. Yeah, I have a feeling Larrabee is one of those people who would probably not look at you in the brightest light, right? Were I to ask him. I didn't.
I don't blame him, you know,
Yeah.
honestly.
I think it's more just a logistics thing. It's just like, God, I have to fix this pairings or whatever. But it doesn't matter. The thing is, like, the reason I wanted you on here is because I find you to be a really, really fascinating thinker when it comes to magic. Like, you're like one of those people alongside like Sam Black or something who looks at magic cards in a way that I've just never been able to. And I just find that really fascinating because one of the things I'm really curious about is how you can look at like a brand new card pool and be able to come up with like insane deck or just even like a really cool like when I'm deck building and when I look at like I don't know Woe or Ixalan or whatever is out there and it takes me a very long time unless it's like oh here's a legend built around this commander but like I don't know how you can just come up with these crazy 60 card decks just looking at a pool of cards out of nowhere like so that's kind of like I'm just very curious like where did you learn to do that or how did you how did you become a deck builder?
It's weird because it's not like a thing that I just know how to do, and I think a lot of my success is also helped along by people like Sam Black, who I think is someone who is uniquely good at identifying interactions that could be powerful, whereas I'm a person where, like, once you show me that interaction and that potential for it, I can find a way to make it the best that it possibly can be.
Mm,
But I don't necessarily see those things off the bat. My brain doesn't necessarily work like that. There are times where I may see something, you know, but I think that Sam is uniquely good at that thing. But like, if he starts with an idea and I tweak it, then we're going to be in a good place.
yeah.
And
Well
I'm just like uniquely obsessive, I suppose. ADHD and maybe some other things too. Who knows?
hyper focus.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I do see a thing that grabs me, like some sort of interaction, I want to do everything in my power to push it to be as efficient and fast and resilient and powerful as possible. And in order to do that, well, that means I have to scour through all of the other legal cards in the format, right? And I want to see all of the other similar things that people have done, and I want to be able to like compare notes and everything like that. And I'm able to just do this 4 hours in a row without getting bored, and a lot of my life has been, you know, maybe not a quote unquote "real job," not a whole lot of, like, family responsibilities, children, anything like that. Like, I'm the guy. I'm uniquely qualified to do this.
You've found the one niche and so basically like there's people who are good at brewing decks. Like when I got to talk to Sam, he was like, throw a card out at me. And I was just like, I don't know, like Stitcher supplier. And then he just starts shooting cards at me and gives me this
Yeah,
whole list of like an entire framework of doing a self mill deck or the whole thing. And then there's the people who can take a deck and polish it until it's like glows and just goes insane. Would you call yourself one of those like latter people who can take somebody else's deck and just make it like incredible or something like that?
absolutely. Like, if you gave me the same card Stitcher Supplier, I would just be overwhelmed because there are so many different things you can do with the graveyard,
Right.
right? And but if you gave me give me like a 2 card combination that you like in one of your commander decks.
A two card combination. You would think that this is easy to do, but like I'm trying to think of cards that you would actually know. But okay, so Mazzy. Mazzy is a commander from Baldur's Gate. Her gimmick is that if an aura goes to the graveyard, you exile it and you can recast it again. And then there's this card from Aether Revolt called like Unbridled Growth or something like that, which is basically a wild growth that
I
when
know
you
that one.
sacrifice it, you can draw a card. So the combo with her that I use to build this framework of a deck is I put it on a forest, I sack it, draw a card, and then I can just kind of just turbo through and draw as many cards as I want and keep recasting it just because of the way that loop works.
Yeah, so I would want like you have to pay mana to cast the
Yeah,
card, right?
right,
So you would your turns going off with this are going to be more robust the more mana you have access to. So, maybe sprinkle in some of that, but that's not necessarily like a big part of your plan necessarily.
right.
I would want to find redundant effects. One of them is your commander, presumably, right? So you got
Yeah,
that kind of baked in. Um, and then what do you do once you have like accomplished all of this and you've like gone through your deck and generated a bunch of cards?
right. Because the whole gimmick of her deck is if an enchanted creature attacks one of your opponents, they get like +2/+0 and trample. So my gimmick is I put a bunch of auras on your creatures that cause you to either be goaded or want you to attack and force your creatures to attack and attack each other while I've got walls up and I'm just drawing a ton of cards with my engine. And then I win by putting out like Eldrazi Conscription on one of my creatures and just mop up after you guys have softened each other up.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like you got it figured out, kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just like, that was a deck that's staring at me in the face. So I'm like, oh, okay. But like, I would imagine that you look at something like Shieldred and could probably figure out how to build a shell around there, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, especially if I know the constraints of the format, like what things are powerful, what is kind of like the expected sort of deck that you're going to run into. I can kind of bake some of that already in where it's like, I don't know, cheap removal, cut down, go for the throat is good in standard. Maybe you want some counter magic for big decks like ramp. And this would be like a good finisher, a good like board stabilizer against aggro decks. And what else do we need to do to kind of like flesh this out and make it work?
Actually, here's a question for you that you might be able to explain to me that I haven't been able to understand. So, I mean, I watch a lot of modern, and I wish I could say I play, but I play elves, and elves just dies in modern. But I've been looking at the Rakdos scam deck a lot.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at that and just like, okay, you got grief, and then you got all these stupid spells that are just draft chaff, which are like, when this thing dies, it comes back into play. How would somebody come up with like how do you decide that, oh, I'm gonna take one of the most broken cards in Modern Horizons and put it with this one mana random just garbage card? Like, do you have like how would somebody even do that? Like where do you I don't
Well, I
understand where these things come from.
I think the initial thing was, I mean, like Grief might have been the first one previewed,
Mm,
and then people were looking at it like, oh, this is basically an unmasked, but it's also a creature. Maybe you can reanimate it or whatever. What other things can you do with creatures? And then there were decks in the past that would evoke a Mull Drifter and then cast a blink effect on it, right? So
mm.
there's all Magic already has this history of doing similar things with similar cards, and then you start looking at the blink effects in modern. Well, first you have to think about whether or not like blinking a grief is good. There are some of those effects where like maybe blinking it is, blink my endurance or whatever, not that powerful, right?
No.
But
Blinking Fury and I'm just gonna rage quit and just like leave.
yeah, and people started looking at the blink effects. Ephemerate was the obvious one. Then it's like, well, what's kind of like a blink but isn't? And then you see all the Undying Malice things, and then you start looking into those, and it's like, oh, there's just a lot of these.
Yeah.
And then to the redundancy angle, you have grief, but you can't just build your deck around grief. You want something else. So I think people started with like solitude as the other one. You saw these white black decks with like ephemerate, brought back. But the one that ended up just being more powerful was the Rakdos version with Fury instead of Solitude. And that deck is just so generically
So
good
dumb.
that it has persisted throughout various metagame shifts and everything, and also gotten like some new prints too. Like Orcish Bowmaster helped out a lot in a lot of regards. So just random things like that. It just builds and builds and builds. But I remember the original versions of the scam deck, like seeing them at RCQs, and they had things like Blightning in them. Like just yeah, the the place you start is not the place you end up, and you got to
That's
realize
true.
that. It's like at some point you have an idea that seems good in theory, but is not really working out, and it's because it's still really untuned. And I think a lot of people are pretty quick to dismiss things when they're in those states, just like, oh well, this is not working out, without realizing, well, the idea is there. We just need to change some cards and maybe wait for the next busted two drop creature to add to it.
God, Orcish Bowmasters, I'm so like when I saw that card, I went to like the commander team and I was like, guys, why did we let this happen? Why did this card exist?
I
And
I
like,
think it
oh
was because of you guys that it happened.
That card is just
Modern
such.
players should be going after you guys.
I mean, I was worried about that and Mirkwood bats. You know, Mirkwood bats, of course, like, or not Mirkwood, whatever. The bat that's like whenever a token comes into or leaves play, it does damage. And I'm like, that's going to get really gross really fast. And everyone's like, yeah, but what about Bowmaster? I'm like, yeah, Bowmaster and bats are going to be really disgusting together, aren't they? And they're like, what about Bowmaster just by itself? And I'm like, yeah, that's also disgusting.
Yeah, yeah, also pretty good as it turns
Yeah.
out.
Um, how did you start playing? Like,
Ooh.
when did you come to Magic?
I liked fantasy stuff as a kid. Was reading like some fantasy books, was big into comic books, and just going through like the toy aisle at Target. I saw these booster packs hanging up with a cool looking dragon on them, Ebon Dragon from Portal 1, and had no idea what they were. I just know that they were cool looking. I wanted them, bought a couple packs, looked at them, kept them in a shoebox under my bed. Fast
Amen.
fast forward 5 years later or something, I start working at a fast food place. There's another kid in my grade. We're just going back and forth trying to find some common ground, right? Like
Mm.
he likes rap music, I like metal. Uh, he likes smoking weed. I never have in my life and have no interest. You know, we're just going back and forth. And he's like, I play this game called Magic. And I was like, I've heard of that. I have some of those cards. And then he basically taught me how to play. The internet was basically not a thing at this point, you know.
Mm.
So I very much needed someone to like Sherpa me along in this journey, and he was a person who had some tournament experience, knew what 3 Magic websites existed at that point,
Have
and
you heard of
was
the dojo?
exactly, dude. I mean, we can get into it. I mean, that is how I spent every amount of spare time in between classes. My school's library downloading Mind Ripper articles, or like not downloading, physically printing them out to read in
Printing
class.
them out on the school
Yes,
printer. Yeah, that's what I did.
I murdered so many trees. I am so sorry. But it was this kid, Adam Gunderson, who got me into it, and we would just like play at lunch in high school. And at some point, he was like, "Oh, there's this tournament, 45 minutes north or whatever that I want to go play. Do you have any interest?" And I was like, "Wait, they have tournaments for this?" And then
Mm.
that was it, man. I was hooked. Like I was already devouring every single like little bit of Magic information I could get my hands on, and then you give me this other sort of way to test myself and improve, and I was just all in.
Yeah, I mean, that's I feel like a lot of us are either dragged in by the fantasy element or dragged in by the urge to compete. And like I know when I started, I would go to sealed deck tournaments all the time where it's like, here's a starter deck and 2 booster packs and build your deck and let's go. And then when it's like, now we have to play constructed decks, that's when I'm like, nope, I can't. I am not a constructed player. That's not how I do this. Or rather, I liked the puzzle of having a smaller pool to try to build out of
Yeah.
instead of like I could build a constructed deck, but in the 90s, those were all just like, these are my favorite cards in a pile, like not very good at that. Um, and so like even now, like I came back to Magic and I'm like, okay, well, I can still play my favorite cards in a pile. I just call it Commander instead. But like when I try to play 60 card, I'm always like, okay, well, I'm going to steal one of your decks and use it on Arena. Because I just don't have the capacity to look at a pile of like to look at a set and be like, oh, if I have 4 copies of that, it'll be really good. Uh, However, when it does work, man, I love me some 60 card. Like the my 2 favorite standard decks to come out recently were at the end of Kaldheim and Kamigawa, there was that the um the rune combos that you could do with
Mhm.
it was like Naya runes or something with the dwarves and everything. You could just chain through and turbo out because I was like, ah, yes, Enchantress. I know how to play that.
Still kind
And
of exists in standard, honestly.
I was just about to ask you if I can still do that with like Eldraine stuff because I know the Kamigawa half is still legal.
Yeah,
Um,
technically legal, doesn't see a ton of play.
yeah,
Uh,
well, it's
it
because
was
everybody's playing Shieldred.
well, yeah, it was also, like, very confined to just a couple sets, so it hasn't gotten a whole lot of new cards, but
Right, exactly. And then there was in Forgotten Realms or in Adventure in Forgotten Realms standard, there was a Lolth deck that had like, all the snow covered like you played Ren and 7, you played Lolth and you had like all of the black like wrath effects like what is it, Dead on the Snow, Blood on Snow or something
Blood
like that.
on the Snow.
Yeah, where you kill everything and then bring a planeswalker back from the graveyard or a creature back. Like that is just such a beautiful and fun deck to play. for like that one season before it went away. The worst part of rotation, man. The new set comes out and your favorite deck is now garbage. Um,
Yeah, well, now it's 3 years. I don't know if that changes
yay.
your mind at all. What is the apprehension with approaching 60 card formats? Like, you think it's just a lot of work, or
Well, it's that like I am I find that I have a block of looking at cards and trying to narrow them down. Like the problem is like realistically in a 60 card format, you're actually using like 4 copies of like 12 cards or
yeah,
something like that.
yep,
And trying to look at I don't know, 300 like 3 years of sets and be like, okay, well, I need to find the 12 best cards in this to put them together that work together to do something is like insanely intimidating. It's hard enough to cut down to 60 for a commander deck, let alone give me like duplicates of whatever. And like if it's a tribal deck like an elves deck or something, I can do that. I know how to figure that out because like put all of the good elves, put 4 copies of each and go to town. But if it's something like I mean, like the Azoria Soldiers deck that's out right now, that's one that like everybody figured out because it's basically Watsi was like, here is deck put together. And I'm like, okay, I
yeah.
get that.
Another sort of pre-con, like, very confined to just a couple sets.
Exactly. But like I don't know. I mean, I look at some of these decks that are out there right now, and like I don't know, I wouldn't know how to come up with like a Golgari mid-range deck or like you know the domain ramp deck that's out there. Like all these decks that use Atraxa to do insane things. I'm just like I don't know how you would wrap your head around that. Like I looked at that card and I'm like, this is going to be nutty in like Commander, and then I saw people using it in Standard. I'm like, I didn't think you could play cards that were 4 colors in Standard.
Yeah, or 7 mana
Yeah,
for
or
that.
7 mana. That's like what? Like
So
that
you want some guardrails is what I'm hearing.
basically, like, I need someone to cut the path for me, and then I can take that deck and I can play and I can win, but I'm not gonna be able to get cut through the weeds to find that deck myself.
Yeah, well, you don't have to, you know? I mean, I think that there
That's why I listen to
are
your podcast.
yeah, I mean, there are plenty of folks out there whose engagement with Magic, even at a tournament level, is simply like copying a deck list, maybe watching someone play it or reading their sideboarding guide, their thoughts on it, you know, and it's like they are comfortable and happy doing that. It doesn't necessarily have to be this thing that you are wholly responsible for yourself, right?
Yeah. But getting over that psychological hump though of being like, "Oh, I don't wanna be a net decker." And I'm like, "Man, this isn't the '90s anymore. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just take the best deck or take" like, what I've realized is I can just watch someone like Saffron Olive stream, and he'd be like, "Here's a weird Gates deck for Pioneer or for, like, Historic." And I'm like, "Historic Gates? That sounds bizarre and surreal, and it plays prime time. I'm in. Let's go." And so
Imagine if this, like, perforated into the real world, right? It's like, "Oh, I need a car to get around. I need a car to get to work." And you're like, "Well, I don't wanna,
build
use one
my
of those
own
net
car.
deck cars. I'll just build my own car." It's like, "Brother, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but it's probably not gonna work out for you, right?
That's the truth. It's like
It's okay to just buy someone else's work, it's fine."
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, once I got over that hump and because like the other thing is when you're like a content creator or in a position of authority or whatever, people are like, "Oh, how could you steal that person's deck?" And I'm like, "Come on, man." Like, let's be real. Like some of us like sure I can come up with weird cool commander decks, but I know like where my skill set is and it's not in playing standard or pioneer or arena, but I love playing his it turned out I've discovered that I really enjoy playing historic a lot because I got to play effectively the Corvald, sacrifice deck all over again,
Yeah.
the, cat oven, and I'm like, "Yes, cat oven, that's the deck I wanna play." Um, like, that was a deck that I did stumble on myself and then found that somebody had done a better job, and I was like, "Perfect, I will take that, let's go."
Yeah,
Um
and, that's gotta make you feel good, right? I mean,
oh, yeah, dude, it was like
you had this idea, someone else kinda, like, perfected it. Let's go.
Dude, it was awesome. I was like, "Wow, I'm thinking in the same direction that a good player is thinking." I mean, sometimes you get lucky and you stumble onto those things, and sometimes someone comes up with like a lantern control, and you're like, "I don't know what game you're playing, but I don't know where that came
Yeah, I mean,
from."
I still feel that way about Lantern. I have a visitor now, this is Nora.
Hello, Nora. Meow meow. Um, what's your favorite format to play? Like, what keeps you playing after all the weird ups and downs you've had with Magic?
there's always a challenge.
Mhm.
Magic's ever changing. There are a bunch of new formats. Things like rotations happen, new sets come out, cards get banned, cards get unbanned. Like I am still endlessly busy thinking about Magic just as much as I was like 20, 25 years ago whenever I started. And there's nothing else like it. I mean, you know this, like
Yeah.
it is so good and it is the perfect sort of thing for me, but I mean also there are added things like tournaments and competing, but also, friends, people I've met. This has become my career. There are
Mhm.
different ways to go about having Magic be a little bit more than a hobby if you want it to be and everything. And truly endless, but yeah, I mean playing,
It's
building
just really
decks,
fun.
it is really fun. And I'll admit I lose sight of that a lot of the time, because
Yeah.
I am so deep in the weeds. Um but yeah, I mostly just want to take a thing and see how far I can push it, see how much I can perfect it, and then after that's done, immediately move on to the next thing because my job here is done.
What's been your favorite deck?
Like that I personally worked on, or
Yeah, or that you've gotten to play, like, what deck do you wish you could still play?
there. I mean, everything from extended in the year 2002. Do you remember
What was
this? This is when
it
like revised
that
rotated.
Elves extended?
Hmm?
No. Was that the extended that had the really good Elves deck?
No, this is way before that. This was when
Oh.
revised had rotated, but they're like, you know what? We're gonna keep the dual lands legal.
Oh,
You
yeah, that
remember
was
this?
well, that was in the gap year I had. That was, like, when I'd stopped
Okay.
playing. I was playing
Okay.
Legend of the Five Rings at that point.
Gotcha.
Um,
It's such a weird rule. Like I can't
I
imagine them ever doing something like that.
like, ban revised I mean, you rotate out revised, but you keep the dual lands?
But they're like, yeah, these dual lands are pretty fun, but we're just never going to reprint them. So yeah, these 10 random cards are just legal in the format. And
That
everyone was like,
seems
okay,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Like, "No,
Uh,
you can't have Sol Ring, but you can have Plateau, here."
yeah, but that format was things like kind of like the origins of tempo decks in a very competitive sense, like the Quirion Dryad Gush
Mm.
Force of Will Super Grow deck that was very much only facilitated by the fact that Tropical Island was legal, right?
Yeah.
And there were things like Oath of Druids that was like
Mm.
this 4-color control deck, again very much propped up by the existence of dual lands.
Oh my
There
god, I'm just thinking about what sets would have been legal in extended at that point, and it's like Urza's block and, like, Onslaught block, and you would have did you have fetch lands too? Probably you probably had the original fetches.
Floodplain.
Oh my
Does
god,
does
yeah,
that
so
count?
fetches and true duels? That's like that's wild. That
I
is
I
completely
mean,
insane to think about.
floodplain is not that much to get excited
Oh,
about,
no, Floodplain was the one from Mirage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that one that comes to play tapped. Yeah,
this
okay,
was when like Odyssey was out, not quite Onslaught.
okay.
And I think when Onslaught came out, then they rotated extended
Yeah,
again.
because I was gonna say, I'm like, if they're putting out like, the original, the good fetches, and then they have true duels, then we got legacy, and that's a different problem.
But yeah,
Um,
you could entomb reanimate things, you could play with
oh yeah,
vampiric tutor, you could play illusions of donate tricks. Like there was no shortage of decks that you would look at by today's standards and be
yeah,
like,
tricks.
that was kind of busted, you know? And
Yeah.
just everyone got to do it. And even things like mono red were perfectly viable, right? Like white weenie would occasionally have some success. Stasis was like a sleeper pick for some events. It
Man,
ruled. It was like everything I love about Magic.
man, someone should make a gauntlet and let us play 2002 like extended decks again. That would be hella fun.
I'd be down. I'd be
That
so
sounds like it
down.
would actually be a blast, really.
Yeah.
Oh, I should do that at a con. Just bring a box that's a battle box of 2002 era. Wow,
Invite me.
that actually sounds
Invite
like
me.
a
I'll
really good
go.
idea, actually. Um, oh, I love playing in like Thunderdomes like that. Like, here is a period in Magic, and we're just gonna play decks that were good in this time. Um, so I want to know, how did you get involved in with WotC? Like, how did you get to work there?
I okay, this is kind of getting into me being a not very nice kid.
Hmm.
Okay, so younger me resented Magic, hated Magic because this is what I was spending a large portion of my time on, and I felt, whether justified or not, that I should be doing something like quote unquote better with my time.
Sure. We've all
That's
been there.
sure. And that stance has very much changed since then. But, back in the day, it was like, God, I wish I had something better to do. I would go to these magic tournaments. Obviously, I'm going to try and do my best at them or whatever, but I was not happy about it, win or lose. And it was really bad. And then the more life went on, I started writing for a paycheck, basically, not out of like love of the game or like wanting to help anyone. And my articles all very much had a tinge of like, I'm smarter than you, and
Yeah,
like you
your
should feel
early articles
bad
were
for having
definitely
to
a
read
little
this.
patronizing.
Yeah, well, not a little, yeah,
Not a
like a
little, actually,
lot, a
you were kind
lot.
of a real dick in some of them.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how it comes across in my writing. Imagine like any sort of face-to-face interaction, is not great. But start writing for the paycheck, and then eventually, try some other stuff. It doesn't really work out, and I'm like, well, magic is like a viable career path that I have, and like what would it take to actually do this thing,
Mm.
And a lot of that had to do with just growing up a lot, and certainly changing my mindset where like this is not a thing that I should be resentful of. This is a thing that even at that point had given me like my best friends, like my reason for getting out of bed in the morning, had brought me all over the world, like giving me all these amazing experiences, right? And
Mm.
taught me so much too, that it's just like, wait, why do I hate this? Because like now it's also paying my bills, like,
Right.
and some amount of that is realizing the effects even something as innocuous as a hobby has on someone and their life, where it can be the reason that they smile each day. It can be like the joy in their life. And if I am the person who is making this content, this strategy content, trying to help you get better, and that helps you achieve your goals, turns out that's something that makes me happy too. So like,
That is an incredibly profound revelation, by the way.
yeah,
Like, being able to sit there like, when I discovered that making other people enjoy themselves and have fun and be able to live a happier life makes me fundamentally happy, it changed my entire perspective on literally everything,
it
right? Like, it's
it
sea change.
dramatically changed how I approach writing and content creation, and I'm not sure if you can look at it specifically and see a direct shift. Like, I would maybe have to go back and look, but there are definitely eras where I'm just like, I know exactly where my mind was here and here and here, and like, oh look, this is me kind of like accepting this and looking at it through a completely different lens.
Right.
And I'm very happy with the things that I've been able to do through content creation, even though maybe there's not a specific thing that I can point to or like
Right.
person whose life I can say I changed or whatever. But like there have been enough things over the years where someone comes up to me and tells me, like, hey, this specific stuff that you wrote about helped me win my tournament, qualify for the pro tour. That was a fun experience or whatever. Just like melts my heart every time.
Dude, you know what? It's like deck tweaking, right? Small incremental changes. You might not be able to pinpoint the one thing you changed, but over time, suddenly you've got a much more polished deck. Same way in your life, you get small incremental happiness. It doesn't you can't pinpoint any one moment, but you are a better person and you are a happier person and you are more content with yourself now than you were X number of years ago, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
it's hard for us to see that stuff and accept it sometimes because people just have a very hard time not seeing the moment they're in. But if you look incrementally over time, we're just like, chill out, man. You become a better person. It's good for everyone.
Yeah. And I think so too. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that I knew as a kid where it's like people would probably like me more if I were not as caustic or just downright mean or whatever, but it was difficult to find value or justification in doing that and changing my behavior. But then it's like now when I'm basically looking at things more positively, just in general, like I just become a happier person in general.
Mm.
Weird.
It turns out it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, if I'm if I'm not a caustic person, then everybody likes me more, and also I like me more, right? But that's again, that's a real fundamental sea change in personality that takes a long time to get to. Like, you don't just like wake up one morning and be like, "Oh, I should be nice." But
Yeah.
you have to, like, come to that. But,
So
uh,
this
so
this
yeah,
was about the Wizards question. So
yes.
where I'm going with this is around like 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, I moved to Roanoke, Virginia to start doing more content stuff, doing it
Mm,
definitely as a full-time job and looking to get more serious about it and taking my role seriously now as like a representative of this company, and I'm playing in their tournaments almost every week too.
mm.
That changed the way I approach things a lot too, where it was like I am going to have to do some things that sacrifice personal equity, like how well I'm going to do in these tournaments for the sake of creating better content and being a better ambassador for Star City and for Magic as a whole. And I think I did a
That's how
pretty,
I stumbled on you, by
yeah,
seeing you week in, week out at the Star City tournaments, because I was watching them on the stream all the time, and
yeah.
your name showed up all the time.
And I mean, that certainly happened a lot, but it helps justify them putting me on camera more when they know that when I'm on camera, people aren't like, "Yo, that guy is a dick," you know.
Right.
So all of this like really kind of fed into each other, and around this time still I'm thinking about like Magic as a career and my path and what does that look like, and I didn't know if the content thing was going to continue ballooning as it had. Little did I know it would get even bigger and better than
Insane.
that eventually,
Right.
but one of the very clear paths that I saw was going to Wizards as a game designer, and then it was just a similar sort of decision making where I was like, okay, what does that path entail? What do I have to do? And I started looking more into just game design philosophy as a whole. And
Mm,
um, like Marrow has had articles out there for a very long time about the behind the
20
scenes
years,
stuff,
man.
yeah, of Magic design, and I mostly just like scrolled by them, read ones occasionally that were on sets or whatever topics that I found interesting and picked up some things here and there, but like never really actually just like devoured them or thought that it would have any potential impact on my life or whatever. But
Sure.
like here it was like this treasure trove of information, right? And uh, I certainly didn't like devour all of them or anything, but I went back and read a lot, did a decent amount of research and everything, and started thinking about that in terms with like other games I was playing too. Because in addition to Magic, I'm just a lifelong gamer. I've been doing it.
Right.
Like Final Fantasy One taught me how to read straight up.
I
So
feel like you and I are of the similar generations, because I was also Final Fantasy 1, Dragon Warrior 1
yeah,
era kid of learning how to read with my D&D novels and my Final Fantasy manuals and all that, and
yeah.
paying
I
attention
didn't
to that stuff.
I didn't have people to play D&D with. I feel like that was a thing that I would have, maybe gone into potentially, like at least as a maybe not
Hobby.
my first choice of a thing to do, but like if I could have done it with good friends, then it would have been sweet. But
Hmm.
uh yeah, just thinking about it and not being unpleasant person to be around made it more likely that I could talk to the folks at Wizards at random pro tours and whatnot and express my interest at some point. They sent out like a wave of tests. I failed the first one very, very miserably. I think even on the second one, it was like, all right, dude, you get like a barely passing grade or whatever, but we need people. And eventually I got the like, we need a body, and this is the guy who's there. So they hired me.
I mean, look, man, if it gets you in the door, it gets you in the door, right? Like,
Yeah, I wasn't mad. I took it. I moved from Virginia to Washington State. I moved across the country, changed my life.
yeah. What was it like? Like, obviously, not a lot of people get the chance to work on Magic sets or anything like that. And I know you were like, at that point, you were also still known as a well-regarded deck tuner and like polisher and just gamer in general. So, like, I mean, I know that like you've got a bubble when you walk in the door of like they're 3 years ahead, Magic design wise or whatever. So, like, here's a bunch of files, then read them. Was that kind of like what they ended up having to do for you?
Quite literally, yeah. It was day one. Go in the building. Dave Humphreys pulls me into a room, starts writing some stuff on a whiteboard, and starts explaining Konzatar here to me. He's just like, "All right, it is a wedge set, which
What set
is
was out when you got the job?
what
like
set was
for
out?
the public.
Theros had just come out, so that was
Oh,
like
so
a
you're like a
year.
full year ahead.
Yeah, and so I know a lot of stuff about a lot of Magic sets. Theros block still to this day is kind of my blind spot because like Born of the Gods and then the D set, whatever. After that, I don't even know the name of it.
Journey into Nyx.
Oh, Journey to Nyx is not even a D. See, I don't know
No,
nothing.
it's a D grade.
Sure.
It's like
Well, yeah, fair
one of
enough.
the worst sets of all time is what it is.
Yeah.
Well,
So
actually, no. I built like 3 commander decks out of that set, so I can't hate it. I love it. That was the one that had Constellation, which is one of my favorite personal mechanics.
yeah,
But yeah,
I've triggered
anyways.
Constellation in my day too. So I can't complain.
I like
But
Enchantress, what do you want?
yeah, understandable. And he's just like, it's a wedge set. These are the names of the things. It has fetch lands. It's like some other fun tidbits. I'm just like, like picking up what you're putting down, and then I go back to my desk, and there's just like 6 set files printed out, and it's just like
Oh,
go through and build
jeez.
decks.
Oh god. That's even harder than, like, trying to build a deck out of pictures must be even crazier than just,
Oh, it wasn't
like
pictures; it was words.
oh
These cards didn't have pictures, and I'm a visual person.
oh god.
This like
They're
if
all
I could
playtest cards.
Yeah, if I could do it all again, like if I could have like playtest cards where I could like move them around, put them in piles, whatever, or even just like on a PC where I could like piece them together. Instead, what I did was kind of like highlight the cards that I thought would had a potential to see constructed playability, but then like some of them I would forget about, too. So I wish
Oh
there
god.
could have been like a living list that I could have kept or something, and I now they have the functionality to do this kind of thing, but they didn't when I walked in the door.
I'm imagining you sitting there with a bunch of Post-it notes going like, "Courser of Krufix, where do I go? Prophet of Krufix, oh no, what does it do?" And just, like, moving them around on your desk or something like that. But yeah,
I
that sounds like my nightmare. Just like
I carried a notebook with me when I've done this in real life too with deck lists and stuff to where it became kind of my thing, and I did it at Wizards, and people were just like weirded out by it. They're just like, "What do you got in there?" I was just like, "Deck lists. I don't know what do you expect me to have in here?"
I mean, that's
But
the way we did it in middle school, man. Why wouldn't we do it now?
yeah, I don't know. Like I need some place to like not only put down the information, but to just like house it. So if I had an idea, I wanted to put it in the notebook so that maybe I could come back to it later because there are the things like Bowmaster going in scam, right? Like maybe a new set enters development and it has this card that could improve this, previously kind of mopey deck, right? And I just want to have that readily available. So
So, did you see things like the idea that there was gonna be that Abzan deck with, the it's with, Whip of Erebos bringing, like, Hornet and, like, bring, the Rhino back from the graveyard over and over again?
yeah, I mean, we had a lot of whip decks for sure. The main one was Sultai because Sidisi, which I think
God,
is
that card is
uh
so good.
yeah, it's probably a forgotten card for a lot of standard players, but I know it's like a fan favorite in Commander,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Dude, things
Um,
go to the graveyard and you get zombies, it's one of the best cards. It's
it
like one
it
of the
has
best just pure self-mill cards there is.
self mill zombies, just creating additional resources. Those are all of my favorite things. I love Queen Sidisi.
Mhm.
Built a lot of whip decks. The one thing I will say about our whip decks is Hornet Queen was not a thing that was on a lot of our radars. So it was just one of those cards that like lived in the file in the random core set, which again is like kind of my blind spot. And
Yeah.
as I'm going through initially, I didn't really see a reason to like make a mental note of Hornet Queen existing, right? Um,
Yeah, because it was made for Commander. It is so visibly a Commander card. It costs 7, and it gives you a bunch of random 1/1 flying Death Touchers. Who cares about that?
well, it
And
was in
it's
a
like
commander deck originally too, right?
yeah, those the 2 cards were Scavenging Ooze and Hornet Queen that came from Commander into, like, M12 or whatever the hell that was, M13, and suddenly, like, Morrow's like, "You're breaking the color pie," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, Commander doesn't care about color pie." We were just like, "Hornet Queen is sweet,"
Yeah,
but
so eventually it showed up in like our sideboards and stuff, but also by that time we were not working on whip decks so much as like, new sets were entering development like Fate Reforged and
yeah.
things. So
I don't know. I just still have a vivid picture in my head of like that pro tour of the Continental Pro Tour or whatever, where Paulo is sitting there and playing Hornet Queen and Morrow is standing in the background just glowering because he hates that card so much because it's like it's a green
See, I
flyer and it's
told
got
you.
Death Touch and it's just like, no, why is this the premier card? I'm like, dude, Rhinos and Hornets, man, that was the year of Rhinos and Hornets. Uh, and of course, Teamer just did not like. I was like so excited for Teamer Unlimited, and it turned out to be complete trash. Uh,
Listen,
I played
I
a lot of cons, man. I loved cons.
I mean, I played a lot of cons too, but it was probably with the versions that did not make it to print more so than the ones that did. But I played a lot of Teamer in FFL, which was like the standard playtesting thing, and Teamer initially was the best. A lot of stuff got nerfed, and it was no longer the best. And I don't know. Could have undergone slightly less nerfing, I think, and still been in a good place. But we're doing it out of a fear of it still being maybe too good, and we just overshot and underestimated some of the abs end stuff and how they're going to be built. It's not a perfect
So here's a
science.
question for you. When you're working on like when you're working in Wizards and you're working on these things, do they look at like the set mechanic and say like we want to have X cards of these set mechanics show up in constructed, or is it just like set mechanics are for limited, generically good cards are for constructed?
It's mostly looked at as an added bonus for sure. Like it's
Mm,
never like, oh, I want one ferocious card to be like the best green card or one delve card to be the best blue or black card or whatever. It's never like that, but it's like if you are building a bunch of constructed decks and I feel like at some point the developers are going to go through our decks and just be like, well, yeah, this mechanic's not really hitting in constructed. Like, is there a reason for that? Is this a thing that we do want to exist in constructed? Like, is this fun to have around? Uh, and if so, like maybe things will get changed a little bit or whatever. But I just think by virtue of the way that they make the sets and with how many of the cards have the mechanics kind of stapled onto them, then they just start showing up here and there, and you can't really stop that. But I think overall it's a pretty good thing.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I like it when like the set mechanics show up sometimes because it's like, oh look, they remembered. But like, because I know that with Dragons of Tarkir, we got a lot of the Megamorph cards showing up, like Death Mist Raptor and stuff. But I don't know. I have fond memories of that era of standard. I don't mean to be talking about a decade old standard format, but it was a really good one. It was really really cool. Why did you leave?
It's a more complicated question.
Mm,
Basically, when I went into Wizards, I'd also started playing this game called Kaijudo. Are you familiar with
mm.
this?
It's the other WotC game they made, Duel Masters, right?
Yeah, basically. So, well, Duel Masters was made by a dude named Ryan Miller, and it launched to Japan with like a lot of success. Was launched here and canceled pretty quickly, but I think had a lot of diehard lovers of it. And then Duel Masters continues to succeed to this day in Japan. And
Yeah.
Wizards eventually decided to reboot Duel Masters as Kaijudo. And I saw Ryan Miller occasionally. I don't know if he was like still at Wizards or just came into the office occasionally or whatever. I don't know. But he is now the person who is behind Lorcana.
Mm,
So all of these games have like kind of a similar engine where all of your cards can, well, not all in Lorcana, but like cards are both things that you cast and put down as like your lands as resources or whatever. So
right.
all these games are kind of similar. So I started playing this Kaijudo game and I was playing in like their PTQ equivalents or whatever, having a lot of fun with it. And then I get this wizard job, and while I'm there, I'm like, "Yo, what's the Kaijudo team up to?" I'm kind of interested in seeing like what they got going on. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you like that? You want to go, work on that?" And they had me sit down in like some of the Kaijudo draft play tests or whatever,
That's
and
cool.
that I thought it was cool at the time. Um, but that turned into like, well, Jerry, they want you for, 2 drafts a week. You wanna do that? I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then it's like, "Jerry, they want you
Uh-oh.
on this set. You wanna do that?" I was like, "Yeah,
Uh-oh.
sure." And then the way the Wizard stuff worked back then was you would get a 6-month contract that would very regularly get extended into a 12-month contract total.
Mm,
But you wouldn't really know for sure until the end of the 6 months, right? So it is kind of a gamble, like moving across country.
Right.
because it's possible that at the end of 6 or 12 months, you're just unemployed again.
GG's PO.
Yeah. So, at the end of my 6-month thing, they're like, "All right, good news. They really like you on Kaijudo." I'm like, "Cool." Bad news. Don't really like you on Magic. How about instead of doing like 85% Magic, 15% Kaijudo, we move it to like 50-50. And I was like, you know what? I stopped playing Magic. I liked what I was doing. I did all that to come here and work on Magic. I do like Kaijudo, but I don't want that to be my life, you know. So actually I'm just gonna leave.
Hmm.
And they're pretty
I
surprised by
mean,
that.
yeah, I can imagine that they would be like, "Wait, what? You didn't like the?" I mean, but that's a reasonable position though. If you came to a job looking for a certain thing and they push you into a direction that you don't want to go,
I
you don't have to
mean,
stay.
did they push me? Like I was the
Or
one who
did you just
wanted to
find?
do it and
I mean,
n-
you were enthusiastic. Maybe they were like, "Hey, look, this is the direction you want to go in. We're giving you the opportunity," and then
yeah,
you
I
just second
mean,
guess yourself.
they knew that I was there to work on Magic and like Magic was my number one, you know.
Mm.
Um so
I'm
I
guessing
don't
that there
think
probably just weren't a ton of Kaijudo heads over there who were like, "Yeah, let's go." So seeing somebody remotely enthusiastic, what probably would have been like, "Huh? Huh? He's a really good deck designer too."
yeah, they liked having me. I think we did good work. I mean, the first set I worked on was this was definitely not because of me or whatever. Like when I got there, the set was in pretty good shape or whatever, but it was the first Kaijudo set that made money. It was in the black. And then
Oh crap!
the second one was the second Kaijudo set that was in the black. And then after that, they canceled the game because, like there are a lot of reasons for it. It's just like it is not giving us the returns we hope for, or too much bandwidth is being expended on this sort of thing, and like maybe we could just better allocate those resources, whatever. So I went in there, I worked on 2 sets, and then they canceled the game. So
Maybe you lucked out. Like maybe that would have been like, "All right, I'm working on Kaijudo. Up, no more Kaijudo. Okay, well, I guess I'm going anyways."
well, it's funny because if they knew that, then they wouldn't have made me this 50-50 offer, right? And then I probably
Sure.
would have stayed there, and then who knows what happens after another
Yeah.
6 months. I don't know. It's all kind of weird.
It is kind of weird. But you did eventually go back to like contract with them for Modern Horizons, right?
I mean, I like working on Magic stuff. I would still do it to this day. If they message
If
me,
I could, I would.
yeah, I don't care. I don't care what set it would be for. I would very least consider it, especially now. I'm not doing anything, Um, and
It would be fun.
there's stuff like the Final Fantasy. What's it called? UB. What's it stand for? Universe
The
Beyond.
Universe Beyond. Oh
Yeah,
my god.
like that. That's a thing
I
that
would give my arm to work on that.
I know that I'm gonna go like full on like aggro debate nerd over
Oh
like
yeah.
I am gonna like knit and pick the hell out of that stuff, but like I would have been uniquely qualified to work on that set. I would have said yes, even though I don't necessarily think the product should exist for like me as a fan or whatever. It is good for Magic, absolutely, 100%. But I don't like seeing it, but I still would have worked on it. It would have been fun as hell.
Dude, it's Final Fantasy. I would have been like, you better have Cecil in there. You better have like really good Final Fantasy 4, or we're gonna have problems. Final Fantasy Tactics better be there, or we're gonna have a
Look,
fight.
I could go off all day. I'm right there with you. And I don't know whether or not Lord of the Rings hit all of its deliverables for all of the diehard fans. I'm not keyed into that necessarily. Um, but I'm guessing whether or not Final Fantasy does is probably gonna it's gonna have the same hit rate more or less. Like they do good work on these things. I know that.
I feel like there's enough just like hardcore fanboys of X, Y, and Z settings. Like I know that there have been some like UBs where they're like, we need to get an outside person to come and help out with this. And then there's some where it's like the line inside the building is out the door for people who want to work on this. Like the Street Fighter 6 cards, 8 cards, they had a billion people inside who wanted to do that. And I'm like, well, you should have called me. And they're like, yeah, we would have, but trust me, we had people. And I'm like, fair.
Yeah, but
Um,
that's the thing with like Final Fantasy specifically is like
it's
I'm
Final
sure
Fantasy, man.
I'm sure you had hundreds of people in the building that know that stuff and are good at Magic, but like they don't know it like I know it. I
That's
guarantee
true.
it.
Oh man, you would have been like, here's my broken Sephiroth modern deck. Let's go.
Not just I again, uniquely obsessive person.
Right?
Like I am the type of person. Okay, I'm gonna go deep here. You ready?
Hmm.
Do you know how once you hit level 99 in Final Fantasy VII, how you could then increase your stats? Do you know the method?
I did in like 1997.
Okay, yeah. So there was a materia that you needed to kill someone with. You needed to get the kill shot with it, and it was an
Hmm.
ability that didn't deal a lot of damage. So you had to like whittle them down first. It's like catching a Pokemon basically, but there's no false swipe or anything like that.
Yeah.
And you had to get the killing blow with that. It gives you an item that raises your point by 1. You get various tabs for various stats depending on the
Yes.
enemies you killed. And I was farming very specific tabs in like the underwater and the weapon thing. Just
Yes.
I had
Yes.
nothing to
I
do.
remember doing that.
I had nothing to do, man. But I was like, I want to see if I can max my stats.
Man, I failed out of college because of FF10, so I know that feeling very well. I graduated eventually after I beat FF10, but I had a whole extra year of university
Congrats.
because
I
of
never
that
went.
stupid game.
I never went. I was playing games.
Let me tell you how my parents felt when I told them I got punted out of college and was working in an arcade playing DDR and Final Fantasy. It went over real well.
Yeah. Can imagine.
Oh, good gravy. Um, okay, so as we kind of come down to this, uh, so like you play a lot of like pioneer and I know you've got your Arena Decks podcast where you sit and like talk about all these things. Um, what should I be playing if I want to be playing historic and actually not just getting scrubbed out all the time?
Well,
Like
honestly,
I've never hit Mythic and Arena. How do I do that?
volume, straight up. That's all it is.
Just
Uh
play a lot.
yeah, I mean, you can min max certain things like deck choice or whatever, but honestly, like your best bet as someone who's like maybe gonna say I want to hit mythic this month in arena is to just pick a deck. Hopefully it is a good deck. Pick one of, the top decks, even if it's like a tier 2 strategy or whatever. Like it if your win rate is 51%, you'll eventually get there.
Hmm.
There's no cheat code to it. There's no like, oh yeah, this thing is the most broken thing. You're gonna have an 80% win rate. It's just not about that. It is just about volume, and that's it. And just at that point, pick a deck. If you don't know it very well, after a couple weeks, you will,
You will.
right? And it will serve you much better, even if it's a slightly worse deck than something else. Just like playing something playing something that you have reps in, and just getting better that way.
Yeah. I have found that like I don't like to necessarily play the top deck, but I do like to play like tier 2 decks and just master them really, really well. And just because like the tier 2 decks end up being the ones that I just like really enjoy or end up being like thematically something that I'm super into.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, you know what? If I'm losing or if I'm winning, at least I'm having fun in the game because I'm playing a deck I'm enjoying instead of just being like, let me take the best cool mono black deck and just play whatever's good to win. I don't care.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, historically, a lot of my success has come from playing the best deck that does the things that I like to do. Not
Mm,
necessarily the best deck, period, but like if there is like a blue tempo strategy or a sacrifice strategy or even like green, really grindy, like rock style stuff, like these are all things I enjoy doing. If that sort of strategy is a winning recipe in a format, well, I have something to do. But there have been formats I've really struggled in because all of the best decks are things that I don't enjoy and therefore I'm kind of bad at.
there've definitely been seasons I've sat out because I'm like, these aren't the decks for me. I'm gonna play limited or something else until it rotates and I get something more fun to do. But like I've been looking at like the new Ixalan set, and I'm like, oh, it looks like we're going to get black white aristocrats back, and I'm like, yes, let's go. I want to sacrifice things to vampires. I'm so excited. Um, but yeah, man, thank you so much for talking to me today. I've been a huge fan of your writing for a long time, and just generally the calm Jerry T philosophy. It's like it has definitely
Yeah.
had a lot of impact on me personally, and I really appreciate you and your contributions to the community. I think like now you're doing some of the coolest stuff you've ever done, and I'm glad you're still just hanging around and churning out stuff for us.
No, me too. I think that even if my life changed dramatically, like say I did find some 9 to 5 job that I loved or whatever, like I would find a way to still be engaged in Magic. And I think the podcast that I'm doing now, for example, is one of the things that I just don't want to ever go away. You know, I like sitting down with someone I like, talking to them every week. I know that you can relate personally, you know.
Wouldn't know
Uh
anything about that.
yeah, it's just awesome, and I can't imagine my life without that, right? And Magic is this great driving vehicle where maybe we're not always talking about like the cards and the matchups and the intricacies or
Yeah.
whatever, but it's just like it is like the grounding point for so
It's
many
what gets us
relationships
to
I
the
have.
table.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
it's like magic is what brings us here, and then hanging out with people is why I stay. Right?
Right.
Like if I didn't have this like hour long to chat with people like every week and just hang out, I would just be miserable all the time. And I'm like it doesn't have to be about magic, but it's just like magic is the good shared ground that we can always relate to and be able to chat about. And I don't know, I love that. I think it's super cool. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done like 200 of these stupid things.
Right. And I don't want that part of my life to ever leave, you know.
Yeah.
I very much respect what this has given me at this point, and I see the value in it, and that value is just never gonna change. It just isn't, straight up.
What was it like winning the Pro Tour? Like, what did that feel like?
I mean, I'm not gonna have a good answer for you if that's okay, but I've
Was it just
just
like,
been
"Eh, whatever?"
honestly kind of like I had played so much Magic, so many tournaments, and I've had a lot of success. Obviously, not on that level, but like I had top eight at a pro tour
Yeah.
previously and everything. And I thought that my chances of winning a pro tour were not very high. So I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think it was like a possibility. But like once it happened, because I think I had not put too much like emphasis or caring into it very much. It just felt like winning any other tournament. It was like I play Magic until they told me to
Until they
stop.
ran out of magic?
Yeah, and then like the tournament's over, and then it's like, okay, cool. Like, um, it it didn't change anything about my daily life. Like, obviously, there are some things that happened alongside of it where it's like I had this hardware, I auctioned that off, like that created like some buzz and some things to talk about or whatever, and those things changed. But like I did not change. I did not feel any different.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I guess that's true because you've just been playing a lot, and I remember I was talking to Reed after he won, like, his pro tour or whatever, and he's just like, "Am I supposed to desideboard my deck? What do I do now? Like, where do we go from here?" Because you're just in mindset of, "I've been playing this all weekend for X hours, and now you've run out of magic." And now everybody's like, "Yay, trophy." And you're like, shell shocked almost.
Yeah,
Like,
you see I actually pay attention to this, like, when, you know, Pro Tour finals matches happen, like, who sideboards and who doesn't. Because it's so funny, right? Like, the tournament is over,
yeah,
but you're just doing it out of habit, and
automatic.
I understand that, but, like, I always just, like, grab my stuff and walk away from the table, and I sideboard away from the table, so, like, that's what I did in my Pro Tour. Because, again, like, that was just habit, right? I was just, like, collect my stuff, get out of there, and then it was like, "All right, what am I supposed to do now? Okay, I guess I do an interview," you know? But yeah, like, people laugh at, like, "Oh, they're still sideboarding." It's like, "Yo, I get it. I understand. They're just in that zone," you know?
Well, yeah, because you've been under like full just, serious mode, right? Like,
Mhm.
and by the way, your deck in that was like Amonkhet, and you were playing the zombies deck, which I loved. I love that zombies deck. But the other decks were like Teamer Marvel, which is like one of my other favorite decks. I was like, whoever wins, I'm
That's
just happy. It's super
that's one
fun.
of your favorite decks?
I love spinning the top and getting okay, in EDH, Marvel's a different story than it is in at 60 card, right? Because I'm
Sure.
just flipping the top and getting something random out of a pile of 100. It's not always gonna be just Ulamog or whatever. But like Golos and like, Aetherworks Marvel and all these things that let you just pray and flip is just like that's I love that feeling, man. I'm like, make that stuff happen. And of course, like I look at that and I'm like, yay, I'm gonna get a crawl worm. And everybody else is like, yeah, well, I'm gonna use Urza and then I'm going to just like completely obliterate you for free off the top. And I'm like, I guess.
Yeah, we're doing different things over here. We
Yeah,
have
we're
different
playing very different
goals.
Magic, man.
We enjoy different things, but, you know, still, that's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
okay.
it's like,
It's
look,
good.
like I like to tell people I like to play the most broken cards to do the fairest possible things. Like
Yeah,
I want
that's
I
fair.
want to play hyper fair Magic, just like like the other day I was proposing a cube where you've got like, full power and like Moxen and soul rings and all the like fanciest mono rocks in the world, but all the creatures are like Mahamoti Jin tier creatures or
Yeah.
Shivan dragons or whatever. It's like, like just trash tier creatures. It's like, okay, you can accelerate to 12 mana on turn 2, but what are you going to do with that? You're going to put an Urnum Jin and like it. And I'm like, that's the
Start
magic I want.
activating Aladdin's ring.
Yes, exactly that. Like, let me just play some BS garbage from like the 90s. And I don't know, that's a kind of magic I enjoy. I just want big dumb creatures. That's all I'm asking for.
Respect.
Anyways, man, um, thank you again for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. If folks wanted to find you or your show or anything like that, where could they go?
I am on Twitter at G3RRYT, and then my profile will have links to other stuff, but mostly just like doing a podcast right now. We have rebranded for the second time after, I've had some co-hosts like move on to different stuff, right? So it kind of necessitates a change or whatever. And now it's just the Gerry T podcast. So you can find that on Spotify and all that stuff. And then in theory, I have a Twitch account too that I would like to use more, but I don't. So don't worry about that.
Fair.
And then if someone wants to pay me to write articles, I'm down to do that whenever too.
Yeah, I would like to see that as well. That would be somebody needs to hire Gerry T to write some articles because I want to read them again. I miss written articles. Bring them back, people.
Me too. I don't want to watch a video for everything.
I don't. I just want to read. I want to see it. I want to be able to go back and forth up and anyways, that's a whole separate show.
This is our true boomer moments of the podcast right here.
Seriously.
Final Fantasy taught us to read, and we want to keep reading, okay?
Amen to that. God damn it. Anyways, my friends, you can find me at Gearboard Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. every Tuesday, or at YouTube every Tuesday, thanks to my editor, EK. You can also find me on the Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic podcast and the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, because for some reason I have 3 of them. And remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.